Can we all hear that? It's the sound of the heater going off. Lovely. What's going on, my pretty pandas? It's your huggable hipster here, and welcome back. Ow. Welcome back to Psychologically Gaming with your host, me. Oh, better not spill the coffee. This is gonna be interesting. Oh my god. Love it. So this episode of Psychologically Gaming, I want to do something very different. And by different, I mean kind of weird. And by kind of weird, very last minute. But actually, this is something that was requested by one of our followers and viewers, Peter Turner. Hello. Hi, how are you, Peter? He suggested / recommended that I do a Psychologically Gaming episode on Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest. Now, while I wasn't too sure what to, do or write or even cogitate for this episode, because let's all be honest, Ori and the Blind Forest is one of the most beautifully crafted games I've seen in a very long time. And the thing with this game is that the main character has to go through a lot of trials and, tribulations and all that kind of thing to get to its end point. But what if we took a look at the game from a psychological standpoint that really isn't too in-depth, but just basically covering the surface? Just a little bit. I don't even know if any of this is going to make sense, so bear with me whenever you're watching this. Now, the first diagnosis I would give this character is a mild form of dissociative identity disorder, which dissociative identity disorder is caused by a lot of things, mostly severe trauma during childhood. And it goes along with the character of Ori, because this character, whether it be a he or a she, has experienced severe trauma. Now, during the first part of the game, we see Ori's entire home being destroyed, being taken over, and it's not that far of a stretch to assume that dissociative identity disorder, PTSD, OCD could even factor in something like this, because once a person, we're going to go out on a limb here and say that the gaming character can be, I don't know, personified. When a person, gaming character, entity, experiences severe levels of trauma, this trauma can result in things happening within the brain that open up, that kind of give way as kind of a catalyst, so to speak, to these things occurring. So let's say you get into a car crash. It was a very traumatic car crash. You can, as a result, have OCD, PTSD, dissociative identity disorder, any kind of traumatic event can lead to that kind of thing, which it's unfortunate. Even a parent dying, even a pet dying can trigger these kinds of events happen. These kinds of, not events, but these kinds of psychological disturbances, if you will. And the interesting thing is that those things, OCD, PTSD, they were already in the person's DNA from the get-go. It was never triggered, to say the least, until that event happened. Now, in Ori's case, he not only has dissociative identity disorder, but he also has this weird combination of dissociative identity disorder and depression, which, just to clarify, there are different types of depression, and I'm going to go through them right now. Now, the first one is major depression, and it's actually called major depressive disorder. The second one is called persistent depressive disorder. There's another one, and it kind of branches off into bipolar disorder, but actually bipolar disorder is a form of depression. There's also seasonal affective disorder, which is actually something I suffer from, where you get depressed during different parts of the season. And it's interesting because my seasonal affective disorder is in like that weird point when it's right about to be fall. Yeah, during August is my worst month. Like, it is legitimately my worst month out of the year. It's called psychotic depression, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. There's postpartum depression, which happens whenever a woman, after they give birth, after the baby is born. There's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. There's situational depression. There's atypical depression. There's just so many different types of depressive disorders that it's hard to nail down what exactly Ori's might be. But go with me on this. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that he has seasonal depression. But go with me on this, okay? We start the game in Ori and the Blind Forest whenever it is spring, whenever there's a lot of colors, whenever it's very vibrant. Ori really isn't that sad, and I read way too much into everything. So for this episode, I really I read way too much into it. So Ori is basically going from season to season to season in the game, at least what I've noticed, and in winter he gets really upset and he's fighting all of these monsters, all of these ghouls, all these different things to get to the light, to get to its end point, basically, which might be summer. Who knows? At least that's what I gathered whenever I was really reading into the game, because you see him going from season to season, from emotion to emotion, and you see Ori in kind of like this eternal purgatory of sorts, trying to figure him or herself out. And it's so fascinating to me, because every time that I see this character, it's like, wow, this character is going through so many different cycles of depression, so many different cycles of PTSD, fighting either their own demons from within or fighting just the demons that they need to get to the next point. I even go as far as to think that this entire game is basically the structure of the brain, and Ori is one of the synapses going from neuron to neuron. That's nerd. Think about it. You have all the trees of life, you have everything, like all the connections and everything, and here we have Ori, this little neuron going from synapse to synapse, trying to figure out all the information. It's a lot. Okay, it's exhausting. Like I said, this entire video game could just be a representation of the human brain. And by the way, just keep in mind that situational depression isn't technically a term in psychiatry, but depending on like what kind of situation you're in life, it could lead to bouts of depression, bouts of sadness. This term, situational depression, I don't really classify it as depression because you have to be born with it. I don't really think you can be depressed naturally. It's not in a human's nature to have depression. So that was today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Ori and the Blind Forest is basically a representation of the human brain? That Ori is this cute little neuron going from synapse to synapse to synapse, transferring information, and getting to the light is basically reaching a kind of like breaking point in your knowledge? I don't know. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. I would love to hear your guys' thought on this. But yeah, if you guys like my face and what I do, please be sure to subscribe and hit the bell down below, because I make videos every weekday and a podcast every Saturday. But stay casually nerdy, you guys, and I will talk to you all in tomorrow's podcast. Peace.
iv'e